Hello. So today we are dealing with the histology of respiratory system. So we will be studying this under the following headings. We'll see the introduction and we'll go with the parts of the respiratory system, and then we'll see the histology of conducting part, respiratory part, and finally the applied aspects. So to begin with, the respiratory system, it consists of nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, and the lungs. What are the functions of the respiratory system? So right from its upper end, its first function is the perception of the smell through the olfactory nerves which are present in the roof of the nasal cavity. The other functions are the filtration of the inhaled air. The air which is inhaled has to be filtered. So it is filtered with the help of the hairs which is present in the nares right here. Along with that, a few mucus which is secreted from the goblet cells in the epithelium, they trap the foreign material. So thus it helps in the filtration of the inhaled air. Now this tract, respiratory tract, has the larynx. And this larynx, it helps in phonation, in the production of sound, right? And the alveoli which is present in the lung is a part which helps in the exchange of the gases. The oxygen and the CO2 is exchanged in the alveoli along with the capillaries. So this helps in the respiration. So likewise, it helps in the maintenance of blood pH by making the acid-base balances, right? So the respiratory system basically consists of the nose, which has a nasal cavity right here, pharynx, which is a common chamber of air, and the foot. So this is the oral cavity, what you can see, and this is the larynx. The larynx is where the sound is produced. Further, it continues with the trachea, and which divides into the bronchus, which goes inside the lung, called as intrapulmonary bronchus. So the further part happens here in the lungs. Okay, so let us move ahead with the functional part of the respiratory system. What I mean by functional is the function of the respiratory system is divided as two parts, as being a conducting one, conducting, and the other being a respiratory part. The conducting part is the one which helps in the conduction of the air, which is inhaled into the lungs, right? And the respiratory part is the true part which helps in the filtration. In short, it helps in the exchange of the gases, right? So, which are the components involved in the conducting part? Let us see. It means the conducting part is the one which do not exchange the gases. It only transport the gases inside the system, right? So the conducting part begins right from the nasal cavity. So right from the nose here, in the nasal cavity which is present inside the nose, then continues as the nasopharynx. The pharynx has parts called as a nasopharynx, which is behind the nasal cavity, oropharynx, which is behind oral cavity, and laryngopharynx, which is behind laryngeal cavity. So the pharynx is divided as nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So the air after this nasal cavity goes into the nasopharynx. From here, it has to enter into the larynx. So there is an opening in the larynx which is guided by epiglottis. So this cartilage, what you can see, is an epiglottis, which is the one which prevents the entry of the food into the larynx. Now, how you can, like when you try to swallow something, this palpate right here, something moves above, right? So this is the one called as a laryngeal cartilages. Along with this complete larynx, it moves above, and likewise the epiglottis, it closes the openings of the larynx. Okay, so Because of this, the food cannot enter, but the air can enter into the larynx. But then comes the trachea, principal bronchus. So this is the principal bronchus, and after this principal bronchus, the bronchus, it goes inside the lungs. So that part of the bronchus will be called as intrapulmonary bronchus. Let us know the names of this bronchus. So the trachea, which is divided as principal bronchus, is also called as primary bronchus, which further divides as secondary bronchus. Now the secondary bronchus, if you see here, this is the right lung and this is the left lung. The right lung has arbitrarily three lobes and left lung has two lobes. You are aware of this. The right lung, can see the principal bronchus is dividing into 1, 2, and 3 further bronchus. It means it is divided into the respective lobes of the bronchus. So this bronchus is called as a secondary bronchus, also lobar bronchus, because it is going to individual lobes. It is called lobar bronchus or the secondary bronchus. So this is the secondary bronchus. On the left side, you can see there are only two lobar bronchus, and on the right side, you can see 1, 2, and 3 lobar bronchus. Further, this secondary bronchus divides to form tertiary bronchus. But the tertiary bronchus is the one which goes into the individual segments. Segments in the sense bronchopulmonary segments. You are aware of the definition of the bronchopulmonary segment. It is the part of the lung which is aerated by individual tertiary bronchus. Tertiary bronchus, right? So this is the tertiary bronchus. So I repeat again, the bronchus is the trachea is divided as principal bronchus or the primary bronchus, then divides as secondary bronchus and further as tertiary bronchus. The tertiary bronchus are also called as segmental bronchus because it is going to the individual bronchopulmonary segment. Right. How many bronchopulmonary segments are present in each lung? There are 10 in each lung. Right. After the bronchus comes the bronchiole. So when the bronchus they are dividing further, they decrease in their lumen. They decrease so much that the diameter becomes around 1 mm. So those bronchus whose diameter is less than 1 mm is said to be a bronchiole. So whichever part which is dividing further into a diameter less than 1 mm is said to be a bronchiole. So the bronchioles could be seen here. The bronchioles they further divide to form a terminal bronchiole. So this is one of the terminal bronchiole. Here you can see this is a magnified image of the bronchiole. This is a terminal bronchiole. So up to the terminal bronchiole is the conducting part. What do you understand by conducting? It is the one which is helping in only the conduction of the air into the lung. It is not involved in the exchange of the gases. So the conducting part ends up to the terminal bronchiole. Further comes the respiratory unit. So this remaining part, what you can see in this picture is the respiratory unit. So which are they? It starts with a respiratory bronchiole. It's easy to remember. Respiratory part starts with respiratory bronchiole. That's it. So respiratory bronchiole further divides into 2 to 3 alveolar duct. So it is again a duct, 2 to 3 alveolar duct, which has openings of the different sacs. So this multiple alveolar sacs opens together. So this combined one is called as alveolar sac, which is opening into the alveolar duct. And it has a multiple alveolar. Right. So the respiratory part includes respiratory bronchiole, alveolar ducts, 2 to 3 alveolar ducts, and individually they have the alveolar sac, right? And this alveolar sac is formed by alveolar. The single unit is the alveolar. So today we are going to see the histology of entire thing. Okay, let us start first with histology of the nasal cavity. So this is the cut section of the nasal cavity. What you can see here is the opening of the nasal cavity. Now let me tell you, you have one nose, and one nose, you have two half nasal cavities. Please understand this. There are two half nasal cavities, not two nasal cavities. There are two half nasal cavities. One nose, one cavity, which is divided into two halves. Right. So each half of this nasal cavity has parts. There are three parts of it. This blue color, what you can see, is the vestibule, which is the opening. This is the nasal vestibule. The green part, what you can see right here, is the olfactory part. This is forming a roof of the nasal cavity, is occupying only 1/3 portion of the nasal cavity. The remaining part, this larger one, is the respiratory part. So thus there are three parts: nasal vestibule, olfactory, and the respiratory part. Basically, let me tell you, the lining epithelium of entire nasal cavity, entire respiratory tract is by a respiratory mucosa, and the lining epithelium of this mucosa is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium with goblet cell. Please understand this always. In the respiratory mucosa is lined by pseudostratified. What do you understand by pseudostratified? The epithelium which do not touch all the cells, they touch the basement membrane, but because of the arrangement of the nucleus, this epithelium appears to be a stratified, but it's not a stratified, it's pseudo stratified, because all the cell they are touching the basement membrane. This is the picture of the epithelium. So this is an example of pseudostratified ciliated. You can see the cilia right here, and ciliated columnar epithelium, and you can see the goblet cells right here. The goblet cells, they are flask shaped. They are concerned with the secretion of mucus, and the mucus which is secreted helps in entrapment of the foreign particles. So this mucus is secreted over the epithelium. So let me repeat again, the epithelium, respiratory epithelium is pseudostratified, ciliated, columnar epithelium with the goblet cells. But in the region of the nasal vestibule, it is lined by skin. You can see the skin is continuous inside. It's lined by hairy skin, and this hair entraps the foreign particles. Okay. So this is the point to remember. There are few points in the nasal tract where the respiratory mucosa is not continuous. At a point you may see they are lined by some different epithelium. I will be noting those epithelium accordingly. So let me tell you, in the nasal vestibule, it's the skin, which is stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. Okay. So in the respiratory region, it is again pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium with goblet cells. Now comes the olfactory region. Olfactory region is again the pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, but the cells here are it has some peculiar cells apart from the ciliated columnar epithelium. So those cells are called as the olfactory cells. So now in this picture, you can see this is the roof of the nasal cavity, and here you can see the cells which are bipolar in nature, bipolar neurons. So these are the olfactory cells, receptor cells. So you can see it has a cilia right here projecting downwards. This is the magnified image of the floor of the nasal cavity. So you can see the upside down nature of this. So these are the cilia of the olfactory cells, and these are the nerves which are projecting upwards. From here, the nerve will carry into the olfactory bulb, olfactory tract, olfactory nerve, which goes into the brain. It means the cilia here, they are the one which receives the olfactory signals, and send the signals towards the brain. So whatever olfactions, whatever smell can perceive is through this cells. So this is the bipolar in nature. Please understand, this is a bipolar cells. Okay. The other cells, what you can see next to them is supporting cells. And the rest smaller cells you can see, they are the basal cells, which are stem cells. Okay. So let us move ahead with the nasopharynx. The nasopharynx is present just behind the nasal cavity. It is again pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. So nothing else to be added here. Further, we'll move to the larynx. Now, larynx is the one which is concerned with the production of sound, right? And you may see it is guarded by the epiglottis, right here. And here you can see there are the cartilages. So these cartilages, they are the laryngeal cartilages. Names of this laryngeal cartilage are thyroid, cricoid, arytenoid, corniculate, cuneiform. The nature of this cartilage are highly thyroid, cricoid, and the major arytenoid. They are highly. While epiglottis, which is this, corniculate and cuneiform, they are smaller cartilages which are present, which we will be studying in the next again. So those are elastic in the nature. So this point has to be noted. The epiglottis, corniculate, and cuneiform are elastic, while thyroid, cricoid, and arytenoid, they are the hyaline cartilage. So when we are going to see the sections of this, you will see those cartilage in its core. So those will be having hyaline or the elastic cartilage nature, right? So what will be the lining epithelium of this? Is again the lining epithelium of respiratory mucosa, except at few places here. Just check this region. This is the epiglottis, and this is the oral cavity. You can see the tongue which is projected. So the epiglottis has two surfaces. The surface which is going inside the larynx, then other surface which is towards the oral cavity. So which lining epithelium do you expect towards the oral cavity? Obviously, the lining epithelium of oral cavity, that is stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Are you getting this? The epiglottis will be having two surfaces towards the oral cavity and towards the laryngeal cavity. The one which is towards the oral cavity will be, so this will be like, the epiglottis will be like this. This will be towards the oral cavity. This will be to the laryngeal. This towards the oral cavity will be having the lining epithelium of oral cavity, which is stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Okay, and the one which is towards the laryngeal cavity is obviously the respiratory mucosa, which is pseudostratified ciliated column. Okay, let us move ahead with the next part. One more part which is not a respiratory mucosa, that's the vocal cord. Now, the vocal cord, they during phonation, they touch and move apart. So there is a constant year and tear because of the sound production, right? So again, this region is stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Please understand this. The two parts in the larynx towards the epiglottis, which is towards the oral cavities, stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, and in the vocal cord, it is stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, right? And the rest of the part is like respiratory mucosa. Okay, let us move ahead with the trachea. So this is the larynx. After the larynx comes the trachea. If you see, the trachea is made up of C-shaped cartilages. This is hyaline cartilage. And if you take the section of this, it appears like this. So the section is the C-shaped cartilage. What in the posterior part? The posterior part is connected by a muscle called as trachealis. So this muscle, what you can see, is a trachealis. So today we are going to study the section of the trachea. We are going to see this cartilage. We are going to see the mucosa right here and how to identify the trachealis. So which type of cartilage I said here is hyaline cartilage. Hyaline. Okay. So basically, Histologically, what we are going to see is the four layers. One is the mucosa, other one is submucosa, cartilaginous layer, and adventitia. So this is the panoramic view of microscopic structure of trachea. So here you can see this is a mucosa layer. The next comes the submucosa, and then comes cartilage. The cartilage is prominently seen right here. You can see which is very hard structure, and the rest of the structure here you can see the smooth muscles. That's the trachealis muscle. The outermost part is adventitia. Okay, so this is a magnified image. So here you have to identify now the mucosa. So this is the first lining. This is lumen of the trachea, and this is the lining epithelium. So the lining epithelium you can appreciate right here is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. If I magnify it again, you can see, so this is the lumen. You can see this is the pseudostratified ciliated columnar. You can see the nucleus at the different levels, right? And this is the basement membrane. In between, you can see the goblet cells. These are the goblet cells. And this is the cilia, right? It rests on the basement membrane. There are few basal cells you can see below part, basal cells, which are the one which replaces the other cells when they are damaged. Below this lies the lamina propria. So the mucosa has the lining epithelium and the lamina propria, which is connective tissue. After that, this is the submucosa, where you can see the glands. The glands could be seen in this diagram very prominently. You can see this is the submucosa, and these are the glands which are present. Which type of gland is present here? It's the seromucous glands, which keeps the epithelium moist. Seromucous glands are here. Okay. Then comes the layer of cartilage. You can appreciate the hyaline cartilage. It is called hyaline because it's glassy in nature, hyalos. It is glassy in nature. And you can see the chondrocytes right here. These are the chondrocytes. And the outermost layer is, so yeah, outermost layer is the adventitia, which is loose connective tissue, has a collagen and elastic fungus. That's it. So basically in the trachea, what you're going to see is mucosa, submucosa, cartilage layer, and adventitia. This four layer. Cartilage, you know, this is hyaline cartilage, and epithelium, you know, it's a pseudostratified ciliated columnar with goblet cells. It should come in one sentence: ciliated columnar, pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium with goblet cells. Okay. Now let us move ahead with lungs. Now, after the trachea divides into principal bronchus. Even the principal bronchus has the same four layers as the trachea. Everything now changes later on when it divides further. Basically, what you need to know is the respiratory tract is held firm by this cartilage, right? As it goes inside the lung, as the lumen is decreasing, the cartilage nature decreases, smooth muscles come into the position of the cartilage there. And the glands which are present in the submucosa, they also decreases when it goes towards, when the lumen decreases. Okay, now let us go further with the lungs. So in the lungs, you know, it has conducting part and the respiratory part. The respiratory part is this, which starts from respiratory bronchiole, alveolar duct, alveolar sac, and alveolar. Conducting part is intrapulmonary bronchi and the bronchioles. So let us see the histological section of the lung. So the histological section of the lung, you can see you may see a broken lines. You can see here, right here. This is the broken lines. These are the broken lines of the alveolar, right? So this the space, what you can see, the space for the air inside the alveolar. Apart from that, you can see some this rounded structures, right? 1, 2, 3. There are many rounded structures which has a proper lining to be seen. Those are bronchus and bronchiole. Now you have to differentiate which is bronchus and which is bronchiole. To identify it being a bronchus, you have to see whether you can see any cartilage. So if the cartilage is seen, it's the bronchus. Now, how to differentiate this from the trachea? The trachea, it had the cartilage which is C-shaped, just complete C-shaped, but the cartilage in the bronchus is incomplete. You can see the plates of the cartilage, broken plates of the cartilage. It's in the bronchus. Then in the bronchioles, you may not see any cartilage. So roughly, I will say this being a bronchus, as you can see the cartilage right here, this being a bronchiole, as you may not see the cartilage surrounding them, right? Apart from them, there could be some luminal structures, and obviously that could be a vessels, and that you have to differentiate. I will tell you accordingly when I move to the respective slide. Okay, so in this section, what you have to see, the broken lines of the alveolar, which is lined by simple squamous epithelium, sections of intrapulmonary bronchus and bronchiole. Okay, so let us first see how to identify it being the bronchus. So the bronchus has this following layers: mucosa, smooth muscle layer, submucosa, cartilage layer, adventitia. If you check this with the trachea had the four layers: mucosa, submucosa, cartilage, and adventitia. But here, this bronchus, one layer has been added, that's smooth muscle layer in between mucosa and the submucosa. Please notice the bronchus has mucosa, smooth muscle layer, submucosa, cartilage layer, and the adventitia. Okay, and the mucosal lining is obviously the pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, like how we had in the trachea. And the smooth muscle layer is present in the bundles. You can see here the smooth muscle layers are present. And submucosa has the glands within them. And the cartilage is the prominent feature, which is the irregular plates. So this broken plates of cartilages, you can see. This is present in bronchus, and the rest of the part outside will be adventitia. This bronchus divides repeatedly till the wall becomes thinner. Okay, so how thin you may expect it to be less than 1 mm to be said to be as a bronchiole. So there are few other cells in the lung apart from the ciliated cells. The ciliated cells are the one which helps in propelling the mucus towards the upper respiratory tract. So it helps in the propelling the mucus. There are other cells called as goblet cells which secretes the mucus and entraps the foreign particles. There are serous cells which help in keeping the epithelium moist. And the basal cells are the one which divide, which multiply and replaces the damaged cells, the ciliated epithelium or the goblet cells. There are sclera cells. The sclera cells are non-ciliated cuboidal cells. Those cells, they produce a secretion which helps in decreasing the surface tension. There are the brush shells, which acts as you can see here in this picture, the brush shells, they act as sensor functions. Okay, and the neuroendocrine cells, which has the basal cytoplasm, which includes in apiary system of the cells, and the mast cells, which helps in histamine production during the allergic reaction. They help in the histamine production. Right. So these are the different types of the cells which are present in the lungs: ciliated cells, goblet cells, serous cells, basal cells, sclera cells, brush, neuroendocrine, and the mast cells. Let us now study the bronchiole. I said the bronchus divide further to reduce in the diameter. So it gets reduced to a diameter of 1 mm. So diameter when you see is less than 1 mm, it's a bronchiole. Prominent feature is that the cartilage is absent. So here you can see this is a bronchiole. You may not see any cartilage or the glands here, right? Yes. So the layers are obviously the mucosa, smooth muscle layer, and the connective tissue. Which layer has lost? The layer of submucosa and the layer of cartilage has been lost from the bronchus. The bronchus had 5 layers: mucosa, submucosa, smooth muscle layer, cartilage, and the connective tissue. Here it is the mucosa, smooth muscle, and connective tissue. But note the lining epithelium. It's a simple ciliated columnar epithelium to non-ciliated low columnar epithelium. So as the size decreases, the epithelium it goes on changing. So in the bronchioles, you expect a ciliated columnar epithelium to non-ciliated low columnar epithelium, and you may see the smooth muscle layer. So here you can see the smooth muscle cells. Okay. Now in this picture, you can see this is the bronchiole. Why not bronchus? Because you may not see a cartilage. So what you can see here, this is the smooth muscles, and this is the folded epithelium. This is the ciliated columnar epithelium. You can see, which is in the bronchiole. Now, how to differentiate this from the artery? So they have the lumen, both have the lumen, and almost circular. But check the lining epithelium. This is this ciliated columnar, but this has the endothelium. That's the squamous epithelium. Arteries or the arterioles, they have the squamous epithelium called as endothelium. And the rest of the layers are the same. They have the muscular layer, like they have tunica, intima, media, and adventitia, the vessels. The media will be a smooth muscles and adventitia the connective tissue. So only differentiating point is the lining epithelium between the bronchiole and the vessels surrounding them. Okay. So till now we have studied the section of the trachea, section of the lungs. The section of the trachea showed the 4 layer: mucosa, the layer submucosa. We have seen the cartilage layer and adventitia. And in the layer of in the section of the lungs, we have seen the alveolar, broken epithelium, or rather the alveolar, and the different sections of bronchus and the bronchiole. So now you are able to differentiate bronchus from the bronchiole. The bronchus is the one which has the lining epithelium of pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells and cartilage. So they are following layers: mucosa, submucosa, smooth muscles, cartilage layer, and adventitia. But the bronchioles, they do not have cartilage and the glands in the in their lining, in their wall. Okay. Now let us move ahead with the respiratory part of the respiratory system, which includes respiratory bronchioles, and alveolar duct and alveolar sacs. So what different things you can see in the respiratory bronchiole is only the lining epithelium, which is simple cuboidal with cilia, to a non-ciliated procuboidal, and the diameter being zero point 0.5, less than 0.5 mm. Okay. So rest of the layers are the same. Then comes alveolar duct and alveolar sac. So here you can see this is the terminal bronchiole and this is the respiratory bronchiole. Further goes into the alveolar duct. The alveolar duct. Now all this part they are respiratory in a function. Respiratory bronchiole is partly a respiratory, but later on alveolar duct and alveolar sac, as they are lined by the simple squamous epithelium, they will be acting as a respiratory unit, truly a respiratory unit. The respiratory bronchiole divide into 2 to 3 alveolar ducts, and this opens into the alveolar sac. So here you can see alveolar sac, which has 1, 2, 3, and 4 alveolar openings. Okay, now let us move ahead to the alveolar. So this is one of the alveolar. You can see the lumen of this, and this is the lining epithelium of the alveolar. So this is the site where the exchange of the gases takes place, and it is lined by simple squamous epithelium. You can see the nucleus is flattened. It's a flattened, simple squamous epithelium which rests on the basement membrane. Surrounding them is the connective tissue, which has some blood capillaries. Obviously, there should be blood capillaries for the exchange of the gases due to be the alveoli and the capillaries, and the alveolar septum. So this will be the alveolar septum adjacent to the two alveoli. Okay. Now, so as the gases they are exchanging, so we should know which are the layers through which the gas are exchanging. So if I say this is the alveolar lumen, right? This is one of the alveolar. This is the second alveolar. This is the third alveolar, and this is the connective tissue between them. And in them there is the capillary, and they have the erythrocytes here, right here. So we need gas to move right from the RBCs. Erythrocytes will be carrying the oxygen. We know that, and the gas should move from right from here to here. So there should be exchange of the gases. So let us know the lining epithelium, which exchange through which the gases exchanges. So there are the three structures. One is the continuous fenestrated epithelium of endothelium. So this is continuous non-fenestrated endothelium of capillary. So this is the capillary, and this is the squamous epithelium, or you can say endothelium. Then comes fused basal lamina or basement membrane. Fused in the sense the basement membrane of capillary, basement membrane of alveolar. This is alveolar. And then the squamous epithelial line. So these are the three structures which access blood-air barrier. Blood-air barrier. So this is the barrier through which gases exchange takes place. The blood-air barrier. If question comes, you need to write about these three structures through which the blood has to be penetrated. So let us see the lining of the alveolar wall. Which types of cells are present? I said obviously it's a squamous epithelium. So these are called as pneumocytes. These pneumocytes are simple squamous epithelium with scanty cytoplasms, which facilitates the gas exchange. They are non-mitotic type. There are other cells called as a type 2 pneumocytes, which are rounded and they bear the microvilli. They secrete the surfactant. This is a chemical formula, dipalmitoyl phosphatidylcholine. So this surfactant, it prevents the collapse of the alveolar. The surface lining of this alveolar, during expiration, they prevent the collapse of the alveolar. Right? They keep the alveolar patent. So it is produced by type 2 alveolar cells. Please note down this is the type 2 alveolar cells, which are the largest cells. They are rounded cells bearing microvilli, and they produce surfactant. The alveolar macrophages, right here, they are phagocytic in nature. Phagocytosis means the one which phagocytose the foreign particles. So they phagocytose the dust particles, so they will be called as dust cells. In case of congestive cardiac failure, sometimes there is leakage of a blood in the alveolar. At that time, this macrophages they engulf the blood particles, and they will be called as heart failure cells. In case of congestive cardiac failure, please note this. This alveolar macrophages they are also called as heart failure cells or the dust cells. Heart failure cells in the case of congestive cardiac failure. Okay. Finally, coming to the apparatus, emphysema. Emphysema is a condition in which there is a dilatation of the airway leading to the distal to the terminal bronchioles. So the airways they are dilated and they are damaged. So the alveolar they are damaged. This is the normal alveolar. You can see the damaged alveolar. Because of this, the airways are dilated distally and they are trapped, and the respiration becomes difficult. Commonly present in cigarette smokers, and it is included in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease (COPD). Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It is a chronic disease. It's obstructive and pulmonary. Pulmonary is for the lung. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Likewise, there is asthma, which is acute obstructive airway disease. Here, in the asthma, the airway becomes hyperactive. You can see this is the luminal opening of a bronchus, and you know they have the lining epithelium and they have the smooth muscle surrounding them, right? They have the smooth muscle surrounding them. So in case of the asthma, here there's the smooth muscles, they contract, they create a narrowing of the airways, and the secretion is increased inside. This may lead into the difficulty in the breathing. For this, what you need to do is you have to dilate this. So how you can dilate? You have to de-stimulate. Yeah, like if when the smooth muscle is contracting, you need to remove its stimulus. So you need to give some drugs which creates a dilatation of a relaxation of the smooth muscles and decrease the secretion of this. Right. So those are the drugs which are given to the inhalation, which helps in the increasing the lumen of the bronchus and thereby helps in the respiration. Acute respiratory distress syndrome or highly membrane disease. Due to the insufficient surfactant production, the alveoli gets collapsed. It's filled with the fibrin-rich materials, and because of which it becomes hard to get dilated. So these are the abnormal aspects concerned with the respiratory system. So in the histology, in the practical, we are going to see the section of the trachea and the section of the lung, and we should be able to differentiate the bronchus from the bronchiole. The bronchiole does not have a cartilage and the glands. The bronchus have the cartilage, but in the broken plates. But the trachea have a cartilage which is continuous C-shaped. So this is the way you can identify these three different structures. That's it. Thank you.